Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, if you've ever looked at something like the state lottery or maybe your sports betting app, and then you compare that to how aggressively law enforcement goes after, say, an underground bookie or an illegal poker ring, you kind of start wondering, well, what really separates legal gambling from the illegal kind? What's the actual line?
Right. It's a stark contrast.
Yeah, I mean, you can walk into a huge, flashy casino, drop thousands, and it's fine. It's a business transaction.
A totally acceptable, even corporate activity sometimes.
Exactly. But hold a similar high-stakes game, maybe just a few blocks away, but it's unlicensed.
Hmm.
Suddenly you've crossed into serious criminal territory. And I think a lot of us just assume, well, that line must be about morality, right?
Or maybe protecting people from, you know, organized crime getting involved. That's the usual assumption.
Right, but the sources you brought in, focusing on the cynical economics of illegal gambling, they paint a very different picture, much colder.
Much more cynical, definitely.
Yeah. They argue the crackdown, it has very little to do with protecting citizens or morality. It's really all about the money.
Protecting the massive financial monopoly.
The one held by legal casinos, the betting apps, and crucially, their political allies. It sounds like turf protection, pure and simple.
That's the core of it.
Okay, let's unpack this core assertion right away.
Yeah, that's precisely our focus today. We're going to dive into what the source material calls the greed theory of gambling regulation. We'll look at the political mechanics that seem to support it.
Okay.
And then maybe apply that analysis to a specific case, that high-profile one involving NBA coach Chauncey Billups, just to see if this theory holds water.
Okay. And the basic economic argument here, right from the start,
Right.
it's not about stopping people from gambling at all.
No, not the act itself.
It's about controlling who profits from it.
Exactly right. When gambling is legal, when it's heavily regulated, the source points out two main groups get massive, reliable cuts.
Okay, who are they?
Well, first, obviously, the government. Through taxes, licensing fees, all sorts of charges, they pull in billions, like serious money for state budgets.
Billions, okay.
And second, you've got the big business players, the huge casino corporations, the owners of those betting apps you mentioned, lottery operators. They guarantee enormous returns for their shareholders.
So, government and big business.
These two interests, their financial goals become sort of aligned. They both benefit from the system staying just as it is.
So the source's cynical idea here is that the line, the legal versus illegal line, it gets drawn exactly where the tax money stops flowing.
Pretty much. Gambling only becomes illegal when that established corporate government alliance isn't getting their piece of the pie.
Ah, okay.
If you're running a game off the books, you're not just, breaking some minor rule. You're seen as a direct threat to that whole economic structure.
A threat to the revenue stream.
That's the key takeaway from this perspective. The goal for the regulators and the big businesses, it's pretty simple. Protect the monopoly.
Keep the competition out.
Yes, ensure survival of the richest, you could say, by aggressively stamping out any unlicensed competition. And the irony, as the authors really emphasize, is that from this viewpoint, the authorities don't really care if people gamble too much.
Right.
They just care that when people do gamble, they do it through the official tax channels. It stops looking like a moral mission.
It starts looking like market share defense, aggressive
Yeah.
legislative market share defense.
Exactly.
That economic engine, that drive for tax revenue and corporate profit, that's a powerful motive right there.
It is.
But this theory, according to the sources, it gets even more compelling, maybe a bit darker, when we shift from just the dollars and cents and look at who might be pulling the political strings. If that's the engine, who's steering the car?
Right. And this is where the source material really tries to connect the dots between deep political influence and these regulatory outcomes. It adds powerful weight to the greed theory. The authors point to specific examples, people who shape gambling laws, but also have really deep personal and financial ties to the legal industry itself.
Okay, so we're talking about influential figures who understand exactly how much money is really on the table here.
Precisely. People with insider knowledge. One historical example they cite is former President Donald Trump's background.
Ah, right, Atlantic City.
Exactly, as a major casino owner there. His experience really highlights just how incredibly lucrative the licensed casino business is. And, maybe more importantly, how vulnerable that revenue stream feels if unregulated competition starts popping up.
Okay, that makes sense. Who else?
Well, perhaps a more current and maybe more illustrative example involves the role of mega donors. Think about people like the late Sheldon Adelson and his wife Miriam Adelson. They owned Las Vegas Sands, a global casino giant.
Huge players.
Massive. And the sources detail really meticulously how the Adelsons were consistently among the biggest political donors out there, writing enormous checks, primarily to Republican and pro-Trump campaigns, for decades.
Okay, so you have the owners of these legal, heavily taxed gambling empires.
Yeah.
The ones who stand to lose billions if there's a thriving black market.
Right.
And they essentially have the direct phone numbers, or at least the ear, of the very people writing and enforcing the laws.
Mm-hmm.
What does the source suggest these contributions actually buy them? Is it as simple as a direct call saying, shut down that illegal game?
Probably not that direct, no. The sources suggest the mechanism of influence is usually more subtle, more structural.
How so?
Well, campaign contributions buy access, certainly, but they also buy influence over key appointments, like who gets put in charge of the Department of Justice,
What?
who sits on the state regulatory boards that oversee casinos,
Right.
and crucially, where do legislative priorities get focused? What gets attention and resources?
I see. It's about setting the agenda.
Exactly. This cynical framework suggests that by funding campaigns, these casino titans effectively ensure that the enforcement priority of elected officials and law enforcement stays laser-focused on eliminating that black market competition.
The competition that directly threatens their bottom line.
Precisely. Rather than, say, focusing resources equally on consumer protection within the legal casinos.
So it's kind of like using the state's power, its police power, to enforce what is essentially a private corporate monopoly.
That's the argument the source material puts forward. It's an effective, if cynical, strategy.
Which brings us back to that critical question the source keeps circling. Whose interests are really being prioritized? Is it genuinely about citizen safety from gambling harm, all gambling harm? Or is it primarily about protecting the established legal and highly taxable revenue streams of these massive donors?
That's the crux question. When you see the full force of the state brought down on a specific operation, you have to ask who benefits most financially from that action.
Right. So, okay, to make this less theoretical, the source material applies this greed theory to a real-world example.
Huh.
The investigation into those high-stakes, illegal poker games.
Yeah.
The ones linked to figures like NBA coach Chauncey Billups.
Yes, that case provides a pretty clear scenario to analyze through this specific lens.
So just to recap the basics from the reports,
Yeah.
these weren't just like friendly neighborhood games.
No, definitely not.
They were allegedly very high stakes. We're talking huge sums of money changing hands.
Massive buy-ins, yeah.
And there were reports of sophisticated cheating technology being used, and even potential ties to organized crime figures.
That's what the reports indicated, yes.
Okay, so on the surface, that sounds exactly like the kind of organized criminal activity that law enforcement should be investigating, right?
Absolutely. And that's a crucial point the authors acknowledge. They're not trying to excuse cheating or downplay connections to organized crime.
Okay.
Cheating people out of money, especially using technology or criminal networks, that's clearly wrong. It's illegal, regardless of where it happens.
So what's the greed theory angle then?
The theory argues that the reason for the massive level of federal and state resources thrown at this specific operation wasn't just because cheating might have been occurring.
Hey.
It was because the operation had reached a scale, a level of sophistication that made it a direct, organized economic rival to the licensed casino industry.
That distinction matters. It wasn't just a casual game in someone's basement.
Far from it. The reports suggested this was a professional, ongoing enterprise. Think about it. Every high roller walking into that illegal game.
Was a high roller not walking into a legal taxed casino like the Bellagio or somewhere in Atlantic City?
Precisely. Every single dollar changing hands in that underground poker room was a dollar the legal casino owners weren't getting. And, maybe even more importantly for their political allies, it was a dollar the government wasn't getting a tax cut from.
Right, the lost revenue.
And given the reported stakes, the sheer scale of the buy-ins and the organization involved, this operation wasn't just small potatoes. It was likely siphoning off some of the most valuable customers.
The so-called whales.
Exactly. The demographic that generates huge profits and, correspondingly, huge tax revenues for that legal monopoly.
So the massive law enforcement response, from this cynical viewpoint, looks less like a simple criminal bust.
Then more like a strategic business move.
Yeah, like eliminating a sophisticated, unlicensed competitor that poses a genuine threat to the stability and profitability of the whole licensed system.
That's how the theory reframes it.
So if we pull together the source's perspective on this Billups-related case, the intense focus on the illegal nature of the games.
Hmm.
It's less about shielding people from the supposed immorality of betting and much more about crushing an organized illegal competitor.
A competitor threatening that very lucrative, politically well-connected legal monopoly.
It boils down to maintaining control, making sure the powerful licensed players always get their legally mandated slice of the pie.
That's the core conclusion presented.
So what does this analysis of the gambling industry ultimately teach us? Or suggest, maybe?
Well, I think it offers a framework, a lens, suggesting that how we define crime, at least when it comes to these underground markets,
Yeah.
it might be heavily influenced, even dictated, by who controls the taxable profits.
All the money, again.
Always. When you hear about a major government crackdown on some kind of underground economy, this cynical view suggests you should probably ask, which established, politically powerful legal market is being protected here?
That's a pretty stark way to look at it.
It is. And if we broaden that out, connected to the bigger picture of how the state regulates commerce in general, it raises a final, maybe provocative thought for you to chew on.
Okay, what's that?
Is the main driver behind major government crackdowns on any large, successful, informal or underground economy, whether it's unregulated gambling like we discussed, or maybe unlicensed cannabis sales in states where it's supposed to be legal, or even selling black market goods, is it really first and foremost about public safety or consumer protection? Or is it fundamentally about the state maintaining control, stamping out competition that hasn't paid the required fees to play, and ultimately ensuring that the powerful interests always get their guaranteed cut of the taxable pie? It kind of flips the whole moral justification on its head, doesn't it? And that's definitely a question worth mulling over long after this deep dive is done.